The Wire follows the drug trade of Baltimore, Maryland, and all the systemic and bureaucratic issues that allow the drug trade to flow and prosper, from the politics of City Hall to the broken education system. In the first few seasons, the West Side Baltimore drug trade is controlled by the Barksdale organization, run by Avon Barksdale and his number 2, Stringer Bell. The Barksdales become the primary target of the major crimes detail. Avon is sent to prison at the end of season 1, and in season 2, while he is inside, he loses his main drug supply. With the Barksdale product weak, Stringer makes a deal with the East Side boss Proposition Joe to take his good dope in exchange for property, and the two also work on creating the New Day Co-op, an alliance between the rival drug dealers for them to solve issues diplomatically. In season 3, the Barksdales face another problem, as the towers, considered the prime real estate, are demolished, and they must plough their trade on the streets and corners of the city. This is where Marlo Stanfield comes in, a small-timer who very quickly establishes himself as a force to be reckoned with, going to war with Avon over corners. Marlo's organization, he in particular, is ruthless and cold, lacking what little of the human spirit the Barksdales have. You can't see Marlo, for example, organizing a barbecue or funding a gym. He and his generation are far more merciless and vicious than what came before. However, Avon is about to get the drop on him before the cops burst in, thanks to Stringer's double-crossing, sending Avon back to prison. Marlo swoops in and becomes the main West Side player in season 4, with Proposition Joe trying to bring him into the co-op, which Marlo eventually agrees to join. However, after learning what he can from Joe, including getting a direct line to the Greeks, the drugs wholesalers, Marlo betrays Joe and assumes control of the co-op, running it like a dictator and practically disbanding it. The rise of Marlo from random hood to the kingpin of Baltimore is lightning fast. We first hear about him when Cutty is trying to get involved with fruit, and then all of a sudden, Marlo is exchanging blows with major players like the Barksdales. It's a stunning rise, so much so that many fans of the show feel it's unrealistic for Marlo to get to the top so quick. Where did he come from all of a sudden? And how could he pose such a threat so quickly after seemingly coming out of nowhere? Is it bad writing? Did he have plot armor? Well, let's discuss. Before we do, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos on The Wire. Do it or don't, but I got someplace to be. Marlo is a fascinating character. In terms of his place in the show, he is essentially a natural manifestation of the game's endgame. All of the machinations, the parameters, the structural limitations, the requirements for young up-and-comers of this rigged game, the broken environments that these corner boys grow up in, the final result, the Frankenstein's monster of Baltimore, is Marlo Stanfield, a soulless, compassionless machine. There is no waste with Marlo. He is pure efficiency. He doesn't waste words. Even his nickname is Black, as if to symbolize him being an abstract void, a force of nature which swallows everything around him. Muscular capitalism on steroids. Many fans of the show consider him a one-note character and Jamie Hector's performance stilted, preferring earlier characters like the charismatic Avon. They want it one way, but it's the other way. And make no mistake, the coldness of Marlo and the restraint of the actor playing him is completely intentional. Marlo is a visceral showcase of the game's progression. The game stays the game, but it got more fierce, more colder, more ruthless. Earlier corner kids like Wallace are playful and childlike. The later generation, like Kennard, are hardly kids at all, something Bunny and Weebay discuss in prison, calling the new generation a whole different breed. Marlo broke rules that others weren't willing to break in order to get to the top, like taking out the civilian security guard, or taking out the delivery lady, a tax-paying flag-saluting motherfucker. He takes out his mentor prop Joe, he hands over Hungry Man to Cheese, and this is after he has ostensibly joined the co-op. It's curious to note that he broke the rules of the game, and the cops had to break their laws also to eventually get Marlo, what with Lester's illegal wiretap and Herc breaking lawyer confidentiality by giving Carver Marlo's number. Although rather ironically, it was the illegal wiretap that meant Marlo walked free in the end. For sure, Marlo's nature is integral to his rise. He isn't just some random hood. He's clearly a messed up individual who would have had a traumatic childhood, oh no doubt. A younger and fully ingrained into the culture of the game, Marlo would have come up much harder than Avon, his humanity eradicated on the way up. The cop Holy calls him the spawn of the devil and says he shot someone twice in the chest and once in the mouth. Something we see him do later to Devon with a big old ass. Him having a signature kill suggests he has the makings of a varsity serial killer, or at the very least it's a legitimate way to build up street cred by having a recognizable MO. It's curious that he chose to kill Devon himself, the only time in the show he does this, but a psyche evaluation of Marlo is something we can leave to another day. Evidently, he's been in the game a while, as evidenced by the impressive rap sheet that Kima sees he has, which includes beating a murder rap by killing the main witness. It must also be said that Chris was essential to Marlo's rapid rise to power. Chris is a professional killer, but also an inept consigliere. There are numerous moments in the show where Marlo defers to Chris's advice and decision making, such as when they are discussing whether to wipe out Lex's entire crew, and Chris subtly shakes his head at Marlo, and Marlo gives the order to only take out Lex. That being said, it's Marlo's word that is final. A great scene to demonstrate this is discussing Bodhi getting into a cop car. Marlo refuses to let it pass, something Chris suggested, but accepts Chris's advice that it's better if Michael doesn't do it, something Marlo suggested, because the boy knows Bodhi. Chris is intelligent and is so intimate with Marlo that he knows when to even withhold information to him, like Omar calling him out, knowing Marlo would get rattled and it would affect his decision making. It's interesting how loyal Chris is to Marlo when he seems perfectly capable of being his own man. This is something we can discuss another day, but one theory I had is that perhaps Chris was being abused by an authority figure, and Marlo took care of it in the same way Chris took care of Michael's stepdad. Chris then moved away to wait for the heat to die down, maybe joining the military or something, and when he returned he did so as a loyal soldier to Marlo. In a way, to ask the question, where did Marlo come from, is redundant, because we didn't see the rise of the Barksdales or Prop Joe either. For all we know, their rise may have been just as questionably quick. This is the streets, people come and go. In short though, Marlo was an opportunist who seized on the hand he was dealt with. Between Avon being locked up and String not wanting to be beefing, the corners were there for the taking. Then Avon comes out and there's a turf war. Avon gets locked up, Marlo consolidates power, nobody's willing to go to war with him, so they step off or take his package. Having a generation of cold, disciplined killers like Chris, Snoop and Monk, far more effective than, say, Eggy Mule or Peacock, that don't hurt either. Avon getting banged up left a power vacuum. To use an Iraq war metaphor, of which there are many in Season 3, the cops taking out Avon was like the US taking out Saddam, but in his place, they left a power vacuum. Marlo is the Iraqi insurgency that emerges. But this still doesn't explain Marlo coming out of nowhere in Season 3 and being strong enough to take on Avon initially. Well, we need to reconfigure the way we think about the show. Just because we focus on the Barksdales doesn't mean other things aren't happening off screen. Marlo would have been building his crew off screen, perhaps during Season 1 and 2 even, but our focus was on the Barksdales. Avon occupied the towers and the pit, with Marlo taking over corners. Corners which the Barksdales wouldn't have had interest in. When the towers get demolished, all of a sudden, this boy Marlo now has all the best real estate. The fact that Marlo has these corners already means he has the muscle to defend them from other smaller crews, and even from the Barksdales, as Stringer didn't care much at this time because he was all about product, not territory, but not Avon, who comes out of prison and wants his corners. As he says, let's see who has the bigger war chest. And Marlo doesn't have the connections, the money or grenades that Avon has, who can bring in new soldiers like Slim. Marlo was losing the war, as suggested by Avon being about to get the drop on him, but the cops swoop in, the Barksdales collapse, Stringer dies, and Marlo is free to swoop in and take it all. Is it also possible that the Barksdales weren't as sharp as they used to be? Sure, they worked hard to take the towers back in the day, but they then ran the towers with impunity. All of a sudden, the towers come down and the Barksdales are forced back on the street, where vicious animals like Marlo have been ploughing their trade and sharpening their teeth. Avon has also lost a lot of capable muscle, and he himself is on the back foot, starting off Season 3 in prison, losing his Dominican drug supplier, having to look for prime real estate, which Marlo already has. Barksdale weak right now, as Marlo says. He smelled opportunity. It's like the meeting Stringer had with him. He isn't buying Stringer's sales pitch at all. In the previous episode, Marlo's crew beat up a Barksdale corner, and now Stringer is coming to him talking about a deal? He smells weakness, and thus tells his people to tool up. Not to mention the game was becoming domesticized in a manner of speaking, what with the co-op becoming more civilized. With Marlo, it was like a wild tiger entering a cage where the rest of the animals have been bred in captivity. Let's not forget, the Barksdales controlled the towers and the low-rises with some corners here and there, but they didn't control the entirety of West Side. There is more territory, more corners to go around, scraps for other crews to fight over and feed off. And this is where Marlo would have gotten his start, in the dirty, difficult streets on the ground level. The Barksdales had to expand and take more territory once the towers came down, but they were somewhat removed from that world for a while, not realizing what was going on, that someone was already occupying the main corners. So while season 1 and 2 are happening and we only see the Barksdales up in them towers, it could easily be that Marlo is already seizing power on the street. When Avon comes back, he figured he could run off the young'uns, but didn't figure on Marlo hedging his bets that Avon is weak right now and he is strong, so it's now or never. The only reason the two crews even beefed in the first place is because of the towers coming down and Avon wanting real estate. Who knows how quickly and effectively Marlo rose behind the scenes, how long he was taking out competition at his own respective level, learning his trade, putting bodies in vacants before we meet him in season 3. And Marlo's trajectory only goes in one direction in the show, catching the domesticated OGs by surprise, and before anybody can do anything about it, he becomes too big of a force to deal with. Marlo was not built for longevity. He was always going to get killed or found out in the end. Lester even knew about the bodies in the vacants but wasn't allowed to open the doors up. As quickly as he rose, he fell within a few episodes. I wonder if he cares though. When he's talking with his bank, Winston says that the graveyard is full of people who wore the crown, and Marlo replies, the point is, they wore it. Can we talk a bit how lucky Marlo was? He was about to be blown away by Avon's crew before the cops arrived. I wonder how long Marlo would have lasted if Avon took him seriously. If you remember, he was initially dismissive and shocked that an unconnected guy had taken so much territory. Eventually he did consider him a match, after Chris was inches away from killing Avon and Avon's plan with Devon failed. In fact, Marlo just got circumstantially stronger and stronger with all the effort to reform failing around him. The towers coming down suddenly meant Marlo's real estate value increased multiple-fold. Stringer and the co-op made efforts to become less violent, which only made things easier for Marlo. Stringer betrayed Avon, which meant Marlo avoided death by Slim Charles, and with Avon away and Stringer dead, Marlo easily took over the whole of West Side. Not to mention the Stanfields took credit for Stringer's unrelated death. Marlo continuously acts like an unruly child with the co-op, even trying to cause dysentery in the ranks vis-a-vis Cheese and Slim Charles. And instead of popping a cap in his ass before Thanksgiving arrives, Joe keeps letting his insubordination go unpunished, and rather he incites and rewards him for it, trying to civilize the motherfucker. The co-op's philosophy allows Marlo to take over more territory unchallenged. He gets aligned to the Greeks because Omar robbed the co-op. In season 5 he practically has free reign because the police's funding is slashed, and the major crimes unit is practically dissolved. He isn't able to take out Omar and gets lucky when a kid randomly shoots him. And the whole thing with the fake homeless serial killer undermines real police work, and he gets off because the wiretap was illegal. The man was extremely lucky, but in many ways that's the point. It's that when all these systems fail, guys like Marlo can stay on the streets and survive. Where Stringer was extremely careful not to get caught, distancing himself, going legitimate. Marlo was a cowboy who had to be taught by Joe on how to launder money and didn't face anywhere near the level of police scrutiny the Barksdales faced. In the end, it took a hamstrung Lester running a one-man wiretap to bring him down. If the major crimes unit was even half-staffed, Marlo would be in cuffs before you could say shit. He got really lucky with Prop Joe too. It's considered one of the most unrealistic aspects of the show, as we discussed in another video, for the Greeks to choose Marlo over Joe. And him betraying Joe is something Cheese warned Prop Joe about. Later Slim warned him about it. Even Avon worked out Marlo's plan sitting in a jail cell. That's how obvious it was. But Joe just didn't realize the game got more fierce and guys like Marlo had no loyalty. A lot of fans feel Joe became dumber here for the sake of the plot. Marlo consistently caught breaks and benefited from luck and systemic failures in the law and City Hall. But this is also one of the points of the show, as mentioned, that a monster like this can manifest and thrive in an environment where cops just chase stats. I mean, as McNulty points out, the suits are more concerned with a fake serial killer because of media coverage than an actual serial killer. They even choose not to open up the row houses at the end of season 4, meaning they knew about them, meaning Marlo's method of disappearing people was not as airtight as he may have thought. However, let's give the guy credit. He is a lot shrewder than he's given credit for. For one, knowing Barksdale is weaker is one thing, having the balls to actually take him on is another. His refusal to trust Joe after the robbery means he meets Vondas, and he's clever enough to put a tail on him, which leads him to meeting the Greeks. There is a period where he pulls back from the violence and just wholesales his package when the heat is too much, knowing his crew is being watched. So he isn't always an unruly animal. He went toe to toe with Avon Barksdale and almost had him killed, and didn't fall for Avon's honey trap. The row house body disappearance system is pretty good. I mean, he was killing people for more than a year without evidence, and this plan plays on the law's indifference to ghetto murders and disappearances. Even Avon failed here, as his public execution of William Gant is what kickstarts the initial detail and wiretap and the entire show in the first place. Marlo and his crew also very rarely use phones, and major crimes had so little to go on with them they just had to give up after a year of surveillance. A year! When Herc pulled his camera shenanigans, Marlo turned the situation against him, albeit with help from Prop Joe. He pretty much got Herc fired. He got closer to taking out Omar than Avon ever was, and he tried for years. He pins a murder on Omar and gets him sent to jail to get him killed. It's below the belt, it breaks the rules of the game, but it was a brilliant plan, foiled only because Omar had a police favour he was owed. The way they lured him out too, questioning and torturing Butchie. Again, horrific, but effective. And then they lured Omar into a trap, the reconnaissance master, who doesn't realise they've been watching him while he watches them, and he only survives by putting on his Spidey suit and jumping out of the window. We need to take a step back and realise that Avon was also lucky, or shrewd, however you want to look at it. We learn all about how Avon violently fought for the towers and had loads of bodies on him, but the cops don't even know his name in season 1, only McNulty. So what's up with that? Ultimately, Marlo is in a business where the logical end is death or prison, but he avoided both and netted himself $10 million by selling the contract. We can speculate about his final scene, of course, but with where the series ended, he came out as one of the winners. And was his rise really that fast? After all, he's introduced as a middle-level player in season 3, and it was in the middle of season 5 that he became the main kingpin. More than enough time to make your mark in a game where the players are constantly changing. Oh, indeed. So what do you make of Marlo's rise to power? Let me know in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.